Former PlayStation president Shuhei Yoshida on Japanese games in the West and closure of Japan studio. Speaking with AV Watch, former president of PlayStation Studios, Shuhei Yoshida, touched on the importance of Nier Automata and pushing developers in Japan to, quote, make something Japanese, and on what caused the downfall of Japan Studio. Yoshida discusses his original intent when moving to the US in 2000 as vice president of Sony Computer Entertainment America, now called Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE, was to, quote, show America the great things about Japanese game development, end quote. Yoshida's attitude would change over the coming years as the Japanese games industry in the later part of the PS2's life cycle had Western developers no longer looking to Japanese games for reference due to the technological improvements of the time originating from the West instead. Quote, at the time, PC games were not very important in Japan, but there was a big PC game market overseas, says Yoshida. The same publisher who was also releasing PC versions. During the time of the PS1 and PS2, when the consoles were first released, they were cheaper and had better performance than PCs. However, as PCs specs improved, they began to surpass consoles. Whenever a new console comes out, I unplug it again, but my PC quickly catches up. Now, when a new console comes out, the PC side is in a position where they're ready to develop for that generation. This was the situation in the overseas game industry. At the time, the Japanese game industry was in the mindset of learning from when new consoles come out, so I think that gap caused us a lot of trouble. As time progressed into the mid-2010s, where more games began imitating cinema in video game form, Japanese developers were left unable to appeal to this market shift. According to Yoshida, things changed when Nier Automata released in 2017 to massive acclaim, selling 9 million copies to date and revolutionizing how Japanese devs would proceed. Quote, I think Yoko Taro made it without any thought of whether it would sell overseas or not, but it was a big hit overseas, Yoshida says. From then on, it became clear that Japanese creators were making Japanese-like things, and that these were selling overseas. Everyone noticed that with Nier, it's not just, that's okay, but we have to do it this way. That's why Japanese creators have started to think, let's stop imitating other countries, and if we create something that is our own culture, something that we understand, then other countries will understand it. I think it's fair to say that the Japanese games industry was revived after Nier. To put it simply, I think it was the title Nier that made us realize, let's make something Japanese. Speaking on the 2021 closure of Japan Studio, Yoshida remarks on his time at SIE being spent focusing on developing first-party games that sell hardware and how this business model chafed with the inherent development process of Japanese games. Quote, that's the kind of thing the company wanted, and as we had to create it, the scale of development and the required sales kept growing, states Yoshida. As a result, there was a time when it was difficult to do that within Japan's development structure. Japanese creators come up with some very creative and interesting stuff, but it always ends up being AA size. That's also why Japan Studio disappeared after I left my position as president of Worldwide Studios. End quote. The remnants of Japan Studio who developed games such as Bloodborne and Parappa the Rapper would disperse to a variety of SIE studios, including Team Asobi, who would go on to release a Game of the Year title in the form of Astrobot, with PlayStation intending to release similar titles in the future. So, through this interview, I guess first would be on the marketing of Japanese games as they are in the Western audience. I'm trying to think of games that came out after the fact that started emboldening this idea that if you just make Japanese games, then the players overseas will take to it. One of the ones I think of is the Yakuza franchise, which got a variety of remakes from originally not having that much fanfare over in the U.S. and now Like a Dragon, Yakuza, that franchise is one of the mainstays of Capcom's itinerary going forward. Sega's itinerary going forward. And then also you have games like you could push towards something like Fire Emblem Three Houses, that kind of tactics, traditional tactics RPG mechanic.
Anime style characters.
Anime style, yeah. That's also one that took very well over here in the US. Persona 5 as well. Though Persona 5 came out before this. But I definitely see that as being, because he points out Nier Automata came out in 2017. Persona 5 was 2016.
In Japan.
Which was in Japan. Yeah.
So you're looking at that same success in the same year like that. Yeah. So yeah, we've got that. Yeah, we've just got that general push where Western audience are just kind of hip to game now. We've always known that. There's a lot of talent over in the East. Of course there is. Like I would argue Japan is the most important and influential country when it comes to video game development.
Yes.
And I don't think you could argue that any other way. Like so yeah, with the massive success of things like, Shuhei credits Nier Automata, which of course sold quite well and did very well over here in the West. I don't think it like set the world on fire over here, but I think it did better than it should have. It's very it's a weird concept game. It's got a lot of like just like weird Japanese stuff about it. And gameplay wise, mechanically, it doesn't like necessarily fit into the type of mold that you would really see over here, or even what Western expectations of what a Japanese game are. It doesn't really like fit that in terms of like how Persona does, or how now Yakuza has kind of done that as well in respect to Japanese action games. And now, of course, like a Dragon turning turn-based. But I think Nier Automata is important, like in terms of like let's get the like nerdy gamers like really, really excited and amped up and energized to play games like this. And of course, the legacy of the game, Connor, you can attest to it. The game is of immense quality, and so that legacy that it left behind in it, like, has just like it's sort of only grown in the mind space of gamers since its release. It's a game that we've constantly looked back on and said, "Yo, that one had the sauce." Like, y'all need to go back and really revisit that one.
And a lot of this is about the confidence it instilled in these developers. It's not necessarily about how well it sold, though that definitely matters. But the fact that it wasn't making, the biggest numbers of the year, I doubt it was. At least it made them say, okay, well, just because it has all of these Japanese features doesn't mean that it's unappealable to people over in the West. Quite the opposite. And so it opened up the gateway for those other games that we've now seen since.
They don't need to appease to us, is the thing. Like, or they don't need to appease to what we think, or to what they think is our taste, right? Like, they can do something within their culture, or they can do something within their style, bring it to us, and we still appreciate it and love it and support it. I think a direct comparison as to why this is probably a better route to go otherwise, or is a better route to go than not, is Final Fantasy. The once leader of Japanese IP has fallen short in the last however many titles you want to go back, probably since anything after 14 Reborn is just not up to par for what they're looking for. I mean, of course, the 7 remake series is critically acclaimed, and 16 also was critically acclaimed, but the fan base did not react well to 16, or maybe not as well as they would have liked to 16. 16 sales, got headlines of like, yo, this is not what we were looking for a new installment, a new numbered installment in the Final Fantasy series. Stranger Paradise Origins. Connor, you like that game, but that game got made fun of and beat, and like dragged out into the street and beat to death. Like, that game was not the most successful thing on the planet. Like, it just kind of wasn't, perception-wise. And so, like, you see this sort of return to form through the Nier Automata team, through Persona 5 hitting a new stride, through this huge rise of interest in games like Yakuza, and even things like Monster Hunter.
Yes, that too.
You see this huge rise of interest in that in the West, and then you look at the rest of the industry, even on the smaller scales. You've got studios that aren't of Japanese descent making Japanese-inspired video games. The most upcoming example, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. That's a Final Fantasy game. An old school Final Fantasy game, not on the new shit, Like, they are very much like they're saying, hey, if y'all don't want to do it, we'll do it ourselves, And so I just think it's important to uphold the standards of where you're from. In my opinion, it's important to sort of state your claim and say, hey, this is what we do. This is what we do. We do it well, and you may not get it at first. That's fine. You will eventually, right? And I think as the industry and as the medium has matured, we've kind of learned to appreciate all of its aspects, you know? And we've seen a lot of different countries and a lot of different cultures sort of start developing in that sense as well. You know, we've in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of really big Korean heavy hitters come out and start swinging big. Chinese, of course.
Black Myth Wukong.
Black Myth Wukong. Thank you.
In fact, in the wider interview, he does bring that up as extending that same conversation to Chinese games, and how, you know, Black Myth Wukong has made it more of an accessible market to get into Chinese-made games.
Yeah,
because clearly those have not been as big outside of China for a while. And to dive back into,
and you know, granted, like, I mean, this is happening worldwide. It's not just Eastern stuff. Like, the rise of CD Projekt Red is exactly the same thing that we're talking about here, just from the Western perspective, you know, of them saying, yo, people want these, like, really deep narrative action RPGs, and we're going to give it to them. And they want them to be mature, and they want them to be serious, but, like, also, you know, a little, like, you know, goofy in the Western way of, like, you know, titties and blood and gore and drunk people doing dumb shit, you know? And you really saw that with The Witcher 2. You know, and I think a lot of Western developers kind of lost their way for the same reason, right? Is we saw this huge pivot. Now, some of this was not. I don't think any of this has to do with the artists. I think this almost entirely has to come from up high executive level C-suite level personnel who are coming down and saying, yo, we need to make these things more profitable. So you need to appease to these different markets and compromise your artistic vision and your product and XYZ reason. And it's for the same example that you have with, that I have with Final Fantasy and Square Enix and other Japanese-led games that have tried to appease to us. Same thing happened to BioWare. Same thing happened to a lot of these EA studios. Same thing happened to Ubisoft that we just talked about, you know? And so instead of focusing on what we do well in developing that and evolving that, we've tried to diversify ourselves and lost what made each of us special, you know, in the process. I'm not, like, the term like regionalism can be, like, a little, like, tricky to handle, but, like, if you just let what makes where people are from shine, it shows in the final product, and it's often rewarded for that. Connor, you're gonna roll your eyes at me. Hip hop is going through the same renaissance right now, where the last decade everybody has sounded the fucking same, until Kendrick popped out last year and said, no, I'm West Coast, I'm LA, this is what we do, you gonna respect it, or you can kick rocks. And wouldn't you fucking know it, Super Bowl stadium tour. People respect when you put you forward, you know? You yourself forward. And that's what we saw with Nier Automata in a different way. And I think games like Baldur's Gate 3 have been rewarded for that statement. It's the entire rise of FromSoft is exactly what that is, right? No, we have a vision, we believe in it, and we are really good at this thing that we do. This specific thing, we're really good at it. And we're going to keep working at it and get better at it to the point to where we are just going to release dynamite after dynamite after dynamite to the point to where we're going to keep doing what we do, but we also have ideas of other things that we want to do. And now we get the return of Armored Core 6, or the return of Armored Core with Armored Core 6. And now we get fun projects like Elden Ring Night Rain, where it's like, well, you know, like this one's like a little different for us, but you stick with it because we have an idea, right? But it's not going to become FromSoft's entire identity. They're going to keep making Soulsborne games. You know they are. It's just they are now, because they stuck to their code, given the opportunity to now play with the formula a little bit more. That's what we need to see more of, man. That's why like a lot of these old titans of industry that we're used to are kind of on their back foot right now. You know, that's why Square Enix is trying to, like, simplify their production line, and have it stuck on, just a couple of IPs and not, have such a wide breadth of thing. Because what the fuck was Square Enix doing making Forspoken? Like, what were we doing? Why is
Game of Thrones?
Why is Ubisoft dumping all this money into his a Skull and Bones? Why is Rocksteady making a Suicide Squad? Why is that happening?
Because they want to make big bucks, and they saw the big way to make big bucks was to make big games.
Why
people play big games?
Connor, why did the Division team make an open world Uncharted game? What were they doing with that? Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog. That's another example. Naughty Dog. What are you doing making a multiplayer game? Now, you've had multiplayer modes in the past, and I think Last of Us Factions wasn't terrible, but it wasn't going to be what it was supposed to be. So that's why it got canceled. I think PlayStation's hip to, as a publisher, PlayStation is hip to understanding that there are expectations on their studios, and those studios should focus on that, right? EA lost that, and it seems like they're trying to get it back, but now the industry's in a tough place because of COVID, right? Square Enix lost that, and they're struggling for it. You know who lost it and then remembered it? Connor, you already know. We've been talking about it a lot recently.
CD Projekt Red?
No, Big Capcom.
Ah, yes.
Capcom should have died in that 2013, 2014, 2015 era. They should have been gone.
That era where he's talking about how Japanese developers were trying to appeal to Western audiences.
Resident Evil was a third-person action shooter. Why? Why did we go that route? That doesn't make any sense. Now, of course, Resident Evil 4, one of the most critically acclaimed, beloved games of all time. It's in GOAT conversations all the time, right? But it led to 5, which you and I love, but it's not the most beloved game in the franchise. And then it led to 6, which is universally seen as one of the worst in the franchise. And it almost killed the company, On top of that, Street Fighter 5 came content like lists. It just didn't have content in it, right?
It also had bugs to begin with. It was not the best launch.
Yeah, huge, just destroyed online for that. And they felt it from that. DMC became something else entirely. And they had to pivot hard back, right? And then all of a sudden, 2017, Resident Evil 7 hits. And then you get Monster Hunter Worlds, which had always been kind of underrated, even in Capcom's own people underrated that and what it could do over here in the West. Monster Hunter World came out, and then you had Street Fighter 6, Devil May Cry 5, and I've got 17 more titles from Capcom in the last 10 years that prove that, hey man, do what you do. Don't appeal to whatever the gimmicks are of the moment, because games take too long to do that anyway. Don't try and force your studio to put out a game that they are not equipped for, that they are not ready for. Now, if the dev studio comes to you and says, hey, we have an idea, we're excited, we want to do this, that's a different thing. And even, I can understand a lot of these games are made with the best intentions. I'm sure people at Rocksteady were given the assignment, hey, we need a games as service game. Figure it out for us. And I'm sure there were people who went, well, I have an idea. Let's experiment with this. Wait, no. Oh, wait, no, this could be cool if we do that. There were absolutely days in the dev studio where the team were going, wow, we are fucking cooking right now. But the final product didn't work out because it's not their bag.
Which kind of leads into the other part of this story, which is why were they thinking that AA games were not sustainable?
That's how this industry lives.
Yeah. And I get now that's clearly we need more AA games. AAA games take too long in the oven. Development time soared way too high to make that sustainable. But even back then, before we were in that space, you would always want to have games that could be made way quicker than your big AAA titles. And Japan Studio was not getting a lot of support. For example, Gravity Rush. I only know about that because of the work Twitter artists did. I never saw them talk about that game at all, even when the second one was coming out. They just it's hard. Like Japan Studio didn't have marketing behind it, and then they decide for business reasons, oh, we don't want to have AA games, which they make anymore. Shuhei's not gone, is gone. Yoshida's gone, so no one's here to really fight for him. Get rid of him. It just seemed like it was not informed by any, any factual line of thought at all. Just with how they just completely screwed over that title. They made Bloodborne. They had the sauce. That wasn't even.
What's up with this like Japan studio? Because Bloodborne always gets given to From Software. So what's up with Japan? What was their influence on Bloodborne? I don't.
Because they helped out with making it, and they seemingly had a pretty good role to play in making it. Like it was From Soft, but it was largely in collaboration with Japan Studio.
So is this why we're not getting another Bloodborne? Is because of that reason?
No, that was actually because a not a Square Enix, a Sony executive or someone on that higher end of the spectrum was saying how that's a decision that's really up to Miyazaki over at FromSoft, and if he even said that they like PlayStation or Sony or whatever was interested in doing something, but it's really up to them on what they want to exactly do. So it funny enough, it doesn't even seem like it's a PlayStation thing, but really a From Software problem. And maybe the fact that Japan Studio isn't around anymore, and they may have wanted to use them to do some Bloodborne remaster or a Bloodborne PC port, which is also something that Japan Studio could have done. There's more than just developing games. It's the assistance in developing games. And to just, cut your own feet out from under you for, short-term profits is just, it really was indicative of what's wrong with this industry, especially at the time in which it was shut down. COVID had just, it was still in the process of COVID. And, you don't know what the games industry was going to look like after COVID. And clearly, if they had, maybe they would have considered keeping Japan Studio around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hopefully things like Astrobot are proving our point, and hopefully the message is heard, right? And I think it is important for guys like Shuhei to be out here speaking the truth like this. Still, now he's no longer with PlayStation at all now. Most recently just leaving. He kind of the head of the indie front, and wouldn't you know it, he was the head of the indie front in the era where PlayStation had arguably its best relationship to indies, where you start seeing games like Stray be the front runner, most important thing out of a PlayStation State of Play. You know what I'm saying? So salute to Shuhei Yoshida, man. Always being a real one, and always just having the right eye for talent and having the right eye for quality and understanding these things. Now, of course, Stray, not a game that like is beloved by me, but like definitely had a moment, right? That was a moment, Cult of the Lamb. That's another one. That's a game that I do really like. Had a big moment and was put in front of a lot of PlayStation players' eyes because of Shuhei Yoshida, And so, I'm going to miss him so much at PlayStation. I'm hopeful that they can kind of like figure it out a little bit better with their new leadership setup. I forget exactly how it works now. I know that Herman Holst like stepped down as CEO, but he's still running. He's still running like the creative department. Like they kind of just like changed his title. I think he was just getting a lot of emails he didn't want. Is what the problem was. So they just changed his title so that he could sort of get his email focused in a better way. Is my running theory. Because it didn't really like change his responsibilities when they took the title off of him. But yeah, so yeah, that's a weird situation. So yeah, I'm hopeful that in the next like 5 years, PlayStation can kind of return to a glory that we saw in that early to mid PS4 days, and even the late PS4 days that we saw. So I'm hoping that we can kind of get a return to glory there, and just generally industry wide, I kind of hope that we can kind of get that going. I would love to see Square Enix at the top of the game again. I would as well. I would love to see Final Fantasy be an impactful RPG series once again. That would be so phenomenal if a Final Fantasy 17 returned to turn-based, as we've talked about, with a high level budget, long game, expansive map, and memorable, lovable characters and cast with really deep turn-based mechanics. That's what I want. I think games like Persona have clearly stated that it can work. I think games like a Dragon have clearly stated that this is still profitable, even if it's on the lower end of the budget side. And then I think obviously the creation and the excitement around Clair Obscure Expedition 33 clearly shows that there's a lot of interest in this and that it can be profitable, and you just got to do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying?
Gotta lock in.
Gotta lock in.